On June 28th, we have a couple of minor matters to take care of at the beginning. First thing is that, for the record, we have Terry DeSisto, Ed Stanton, Jackie Romanicki, Jerry Freecott, Jay Allard, and myself, so we have a quorum. Second thing is that the minutes from June 7th were promulgated by Mason and Molly. Anybody have any questions or comments? If not, a motion's in order.
So moved. Second. Move to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And then, Mason, we have two bills to pay.
We do. So we have two bills before us tonight. The first is from Skanska for OPM services related to the Willett School roof project. That is in the amount of $1,316.25. And you can see on the agenda. And the second is also for the Willett School roof project, but this is for Socotech for designer services. As you know, that project is out to bid for construction right now, so we're at 50% completion.
And I believe the bids are due tomorrow, aren't
And the
they?
bids are due tomorrow at, I believe, 2:30.
And then at our next regular meeting on July 5th at City Hall, we'll be reviewing those bids, hopefully being able to make a recommendation to the mayor to execute a contract. And also on that night, we should be getting the bids for Attleboro Pawtucket water connection, correct?
We have a bid opening tomorrow, and that is the intention.
So we'll also have that on our agenda for the 5th. As long as we're talking about the next meetings, July 12th is here, and that is the Council on Aging presentation by the feasibility study architect on that. July 19th is the regular school building committee meeting in this room that all of you attend, and you're going to get the 26th of July off.
Yay. Are you sure?
Who knew when you volunteered for this committee that you'd have so many meetings? But back to the two bills. Mason, you're recommending these are ready to be paid?
I am.
Does anybody have any questions?
How much was the Skanska bill?
Skanska bill is for $1,316.25.
Not the 390 that says on my agenda.
Yeah.
The updated agenda on the website is the $1,316.25.
Okay, good.
Okay.
All right,
That might have been the June 14th agenda. Is that?
I don't know, it's just
How
what
is this?
it's the last thing I printed. but
28.
That's okay.
Yeah, it was,
And for the record, Andrew Acosta is here.
okay, so move to approve.
Correction, sorry. Yes, that's the bill to date. I apologize. $390 for this period, correct.
It's only 390. Okay,
So it's 390?
$390, you're
happy to
correct.
pay less.
My mistake.
Okay. So
Okay.
move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we've taken care of that, and we've taken care of all of that. Gary Erasian was going to be here, but I think
He was on his way, I saw him,
you saw him in his black truck.
he was on his way.
Okay, so, well, we're waiting for Gary to come in. The last time we met, KBA went through various space needs, talked about the savings that there might be from having a combined facility as opposed to two separate facilities. And we were focusing at that point on seeing whether it would fit as part of a city hall complex. And so we gave you the task of taking a look at that. But we also had some discussions between the last meeting and now. And so there are a couple of other sites that we put back on the radar to take a look at. And so my understanding is that tonight, you're going to show us the various sites and what we can and cannot do. And so we can get to the point of being able to make some recommendations to the mayor. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay, then Sean, are you,
Yeah, I'll start. I'll stand since it's only the one screen this evening. So this is just a kind of a summary from where we left off on the square footages of the buildings. Police program, roughly 70,000 square feet as a standalone building. Fire program, roughly 58,000 square feet as a standalone building. And then with a combined facility, you know, of the two, the total square footage and the accessory structure is roughly 128,000 square feet. So as Jack just noted, wrong button, so by getting all the efficiencies of the two buildings together, able to reduce it to roughly 100,000 square feet. So shared building services, shared training facilities, shared community meeting rooms, shared dispatch, shared wellness, and shared auxiliary spaces. So I shared all this, keep saying shared this last time. So I'll go through this pretty quickly, just because it's going to be a common theme as we go through this city block. But the discussion that was had was to utilize more of the city block. I've drawn a blank on the street on this side over here, but pretty much Pine, Park, and Union. That side street here, I forgot what it was, sorry.
Dunham?
But, so really creating that municipal complex.
That's Dunham Street to
Yeah, maybe
the
it is
far
Dunham.
left, I think, right?
I think so, sorry. So parking was a large need, you know, so a large parking structure for private only, roughly 263 spots. This is designated as a 4-story structure.
So this would be police
Police and fire.
so it
Private
would be,
vehicles.
it would be the policemen and firemen's vehicles parked in there while they were on duty, and it would also house the cruisers and other types of vehicles,
Cruisers,
correct?
personal vehicles, everything's secured. Some trailers, light racks, you know, or light trailers, depending on, you know, some boat storage, depending on how it was distinguished. But really what we wanted to show is, you know, obviously that's a large chunk of this city block, just for secured parking, just for private parking, for the facility. So again, I'll go through it pretty quickly here, but a 3-story police structure here, a fire administration structure, fire apparatus structure here in the center, and then the firehouse, which houses the bunks for the firefighters, you know, day room, some training areas as well, but, you know, this is the firehouse. We're showing the city block kind of askew here, City Hall, a little bit askew here, but just really just showing how it's really taken up this entire block of what was discussed at our last meeting. So the yellow line is that the properties that would be included in this block. So I have a couple different iterations of this scenario, but really, like we're saying, large parking structure, 3-story police station, roughly a 2 to 3-story fire administration piece, apparatus, which is, we had 5 double bay apparatus, you know, so exiting on both towards Union and Pine, and then the firehouse. And City Hall would remain in this situation, but, you know, yes, it is shown askew.
But City Hall would then have not very much parking at all.
Yeah, you lose all parking, because all this would be gone. This would be gone. We're showing a little bit of parking here, but just really a pass-through, which
And the
really
Gatra-
wouldn't be sufficient.
And the Gatra bus station would be in the way,
It's right there, yeah.
and it would require us to buy some property up where the parking garage
All
is.
here.
And to be clear, the city hall, it's a new building, correct?
In this scenario, yes, but that's not the intent. You know, I think the last time when we did have the discussion, it was, hey, let's just think of a whole new municipal complex. But the intent would be to keep City Hall as is, maybe some renovation, but not to tear it down and rebuild it in the same location. But yes, it is shown as though it was, but that's not the
And
intent.
is that because that's really the only way you could fit that on this?
Theoretically, I mean, there could be some wiggle room left and right on the site plan. You know, these are just, as we're showing, just blocks. For square footages, you know, this could have a 4-story element, which could start creeping this over a little bit to keep City Hall as it is. But as Jack noted, there's no public parking. There's minimal, and it's reduced as it currently sits.
I got a question. Is it possible to put, like, either the firehouse or the administration over the apparatus bay, to make a smaller footprint?
Possible, yes, not advisable, because the function of the apparatus bay, what happens within that, there's a lot of toxins, carcinogens within that air. Now you have an extra level of barrier and sealing for anything that's occupied above that. That includes diesel fumes, that includes off-gassing from the gear after it returns. So anything is possible, but we try and avoid that as much as possible because it's not a healthy scenario.
And if I remember right, that's why the blue block on the right side is where the living quarters are.
Correct.
It's no longer above the apparatus bay, and you run over to a pole and break your ankle at the bottom.
Correct. The ideal response scenario for firefighters is at the same level as the equipment. You
May or may
minimize
not.
that risk.
So, as much as I love myself a good municipal complex, and I was all excited, I think it's too cramped. It's too cramped, and we lose, City Hall parking is already tight. I just don't think it's, and for other reasons, I just don't think it's what I thought it was gonna be at this particular point in time.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think,
I wish it were otherwise, but I don't think it's gonna work.
but part of a feasibility study
Yeah.
is to look at the possibilities and make sure we can say to you and to the municipal council and to the public that we've looked at every possible way to do it. This, and you can show us your other iterations, but this isn't gonna work.
Yep, and that's clear. So I'll go through the next couple options pretty quickly. Just different locations of where the garage sits, a little bit of a different trapezoidal shape. Again, City Hall would remain the same. Police station here, fire admin, and firehouse and app bay over here. But a little bit create more of a public entrance for the or the police and fire, with a plaza out front. But again, reduction of parking, just secured parking garage for the public safety facility, and it's, again, you're acquiring other properties. Another concept, just again, where the garage, this is just rotated 90 degrees, just really showing you how much it takes up for the property. And then lastly, this one was a demolition of the existing City Hall, and then kind of creating that municipal complex, if you will, and then tying into the post office as possible, or the old post office. This gives a little bit more parking, but still pretty insufficient for the current needs.
And this one, we'd need to find a new place to put a city hall.
Well, City Hall would be here,
Got it up.
but it would be probably another story at least.
Oh, I see, it's that blue block there?
This blue block here, so
Oh,
there would be
okay.
like kind of a connection point, so it would be police admin story here to
Oh,
City
okay.
Hall, but it adds a whole nother substantial cost of construction because you're building
Because
another
we're
building.
adding 30,000 square feet for a new city hall, at $1,000 a foot.
And in this version, fire admin, it looks like it becomes combined with the parking garage, or at least below it.
Well, that's part, yeah, so it really is not that feasible,
Sure.
but we were just looking for other ideas to create more surface space for parking, for public space, whatever it may be. But again, just kind of proving the point or showing the point of how feasible it really isn't, based on the current program, the needs of the departments, even with the acquisition of the other properties. So with that, there were 3 other lots or properties that we discussed offline with the mayor, city planner, Jack, and Mason. So this lot, we're calling the Pleasant Street lot. So Pleasant Street, you can probably speak to actually where it's located better than I can.
Yeah, so the Harbor One Bank is up there at the street, the YMCA's secondary facility is just below it there. There's a ball field there that actually is not owned by the Y, and that property is owned by a company whose principal is a guy named Philip Schwachman, and I believe it runs in sort of a U-shape
Yeah, so
all the way around the YMCA property.
sorry, it's not
And
reading very
uses
clearly.
the northeast access road, I think,
Yep.
as one of its main entrances, and I think there's also another way in. Somebody knocking on the door?
So I'm seeing that it's actually kind of, sorry, it's hard to see, but as Jack was just saying, the lot lines are here, so it's that kind of U-shaped lot along here. There's a small residential lot here, that access road. I'm seeing that it's very hard to see, but these double blue lines right here, there's a wetlands all through here. And then, sorry, I know you can't see this, I need to make it clear, but there's a purple line that comes across from here, which is the FEMA floodplain setback. So really, this is really all unusable of this lot. with the exception of on this side and on this side. So what we took was a similar program sized similarly to the program that we've done for police and fire. All surface parking all throughout this location of the lot. Firehouse and fire apparatus here. Police and fire admin in this location, and then police all throughout here with Sally Port and detention and everything. With direct access onto this loop road, so kind of two ways out, either north or southeast, or southwest. But it confines the lot really just because of, again, the blue line through here, the wetlands, built in north, and then the floodplain, which is pretty much all this section right here.
So would it technically fit then?
Technically, it fits. The parking is a little bit limited, but we're just showing all surface parking right now. There's some private spots here, some public spots would probably be at this location, but this would all be secured parking here and here.
And,
Technically, yes, it would fit.
and because of the distance that this is from the current central fire station, would there be an issue then with response times?
Exactly. So if this was to be pursued, that would be the next step, would be to reanalyze the response time study, or to have it done in this location.
So wouldn't the decision to make that the location be a function of the runs?
The results.
You know,
Correct.
you wouldn't want to make a decision on the site
Sure.
and then find out the runs don't work. I would think it's the other way around.
No, exactly. Like if this was narrowed down to the one or two sites, the next step would be to do a response study for the fire department. And then if it's too far out of the means, then that would knock that off the list for the fire department specifically. The police department, as we noted before, they can be theoretically located anywhere for the headquarters, because they're responding out on the streets.
It's under a mile. It's like, I believe it was a half a mile to 3/4.
From their existing?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's up there.
Surprisingly, that can play a significant result in the response. But the consultant that we use, we have on our team, ready to analyze these sites, would look at the existing scenario, and then look at proposed, close this, and what does that do to
Yeah, how it
the
affects
ideal
the
response.
other ones, yeah.
And he also does a resource and allocation shift as part of that, because that may just mean shifting more manpower to another station. That may mean the requirement of another substation, and he'd give the recommendation based on that as part of, okay, we're looking at this location, that means X, Y, and Z for the response and the overall.
Did you look at the longevity of all the other stations?
We only looked at analyzed police
Oh, okay.
headquarters and fire headquarters.
I mean, the South Attleboro station should still be in pretty good shape.
Briggs Corner is kind of,
Briggs Corner is an interesting facility that we just put a roof on.
that's what I'm saying, if you base that on, but then if one of the substations falls apart or has major,
Yeah. I feel like it's risky,
Yeah.
but yeah, I agree. I don't, it seems to
it's
me.
not a
far. I
perfect
mean, I'm not an
science.
expert,
It's
but I
not a
know,
perfect science.
no,
but-
and I know Chief LaChance recently mentioned concerned, I forget what the report was about run times, but that they were,
He
that
said
was,
that they were having problems right now meeting
Yes.
NFPA standards where they are.
yes, exactly.
So
they're
this
centrally
may
located.
Yep.
cause a problem. But it is, I suppose, a possibility, but part of the equation also is we don't own it.
That too,
Yeah.
that too.
So with
And-
that,
And so we would have to acquire it.
Jack, so you're saying the consideration is some of the savings that potentially we're getting out of a joint complex, you
Yeah, well,
might be
we haven't
mitigating.
gotten to that pivot yet, but yes, if
But
we
with
were
this, you're
to,
saying-
if we were to say this was, for instance, we wanted to acquire it and just put a police station there, not only then do we lose the 16,000 or so square feet that we were saving by having a combined facility, but now we got to buy a piece of property. So there, certainly, I think it's a possibility, but it doesn't seem like a high possibility at this
Yeah, I would
point.
agree. Yeah.
So the next property that we revisited was Commerce Way, so the New England Sports Complex, is that what it's called? New England Sports
Yeah,
Hockey
Village.
Rink up here. Commerce Way. Don't know the
County
name.
Street.
County Street here. So, so this is the block or the property in this area, some residential homes here, an existing cut at this location, but just to note, there is wetlands at this corner of the property.
So there wouldn't be access from County Street, only from Commerce Way?
Is there an
Well, there's a
opportunity
There
curb
would
cut on
be.
County too, though, you know. We left a curb cut on County Street too.
right in between?
It's right here.
Oh, okay, so there is access from
Yeah.
County Street.
Sorry, but at this location, it would be the wetlands. I mean, it would be able to work with it, but yes, there's this cut right here. And then the cut right here.
But it's that whole
It's this whole,
large piece of property.
Yep.
How's the,
Which again is privately owned by New England Sports Village, not owned by us, but we thought we should, it was one of the original 12 sites that we started with.
how's the topography up in the?
so this, it's pretty much, it's higher out back here. There's some, I believe there's some ledge in some certain locations, but I would say it flattens out because it's more sloping this way from this area and then kind of sloping up this way, but this is workable. It's not as drastic as over here. You know, it's fairly flat in this location, fairly flat here, but it definitely rises up in the back here.
The problem with that is now the fire department is way away from the Pleasant Street area of town and right around the corner from the South Attleboro station.
One of the newest stations.
So that doesn't really work for the fire department.
I wouldn't think so either.
I would think the response times would be worse, and there'd be,
Much
Yeah,
worse.
I would say
wouldn't you?
a half a mile versus how far away would you say Commerce Way is
Well, that's
from Union now?
significantly south of County Square, right?
Couple miles, yeah.
Couple miles. So then you have to readjust everything else.
Right, so I think, you know, the exercise was, or is to show, you know, a combined facility, you know, how much square footage it takes up from, on the property, you know, substantial parking and access. Granted, we're not showing the access off of here, but, you know, just really just as a visual to show how large of a complex it would need to be for this property. But you're right, if this was the direction we were gonna start heading, response time would analyze and say yes or no. Most likely, it's towards the no. So then if this was the property, or a property to be on the table, just for police headquarters. Any other questions on this?
And there is, my memory is there's a lot of ledge out in that area, right?
Just from what we're seeing, I mean, there's obviously excavation on this location. Have some familiar with the sports complex? Yeah, it's all ledge. Over here.
Yeah, I mean, I represented the owner of that piece that's there to your left and got some permits to put a manufacturing facility there, and they're in essence cutting into the hill and making a flat area with a lot of rock behind it.
Okay. Then the last one that we reviewed or started to analyze was the existing fire headquarters here on Union Street. So this is that, I believe this is the rec center, the old school, small residence, some restaurant, sorry.
Don and Gigi's,
And then another restaurant up here as well.
Union Theater Building.
And then obviously the parking. So looking at that kind of city block as a whole, continuation of this building footprint, combined facility, you know, we're taking up the entire north to south of the lot. You know, the apron would be here, apron would be through here, so you're, reduced parking, you know, definitely not enough, it would be another parking structure either here or somewhere else, in a similar location or a close proximity. But really what it's showing and proving to everybody else here as well is it's not large enough for a combined facility. If the fire department were to be, you know, renovated, or not renovated, but rebuilt in this location, a new headquarters here. So what all these are telling us, or what we've been analyzing, is that we're looking based on the property that's available and where they're located to have separate facilities.
And we'd lose a rec center
Yeah,
and have to acquire more property.
How much of that from Dunham Street to Pearl Street, how much of that block is city-owned currently?
I believe it's just the fire station, right?
The fire
No.
station, the Richardson
The Richardson
School,
School,
and
the rec center.
Yep,
All right, so this,
So-
just not this piece here.
The Union Square, Don and Gigi's, and the
those are all private, yep.
parking lot.
Yeah, so Friedman owns the parking lot. I believe that he owns the old Union Theater building, and I think he actually owns the restaurant Don and Gigi's, and they lease it from him. I believe that's the case.
And is there another parking lot between Union and the restaurant? Is that a separate parcel?
Right here?
Yes.
Yeah, that is owned by Mr. Friedman,
Oh,
and that is train parking every day. Lots of people park there and pay and walk across the street and get on the train.
Yeah, but here, like you said, so we have acquisition issues and we lose a rec center.
Would you have?
Yeah. So we'd have to find some place to put the rec center then.
Yep, yep.
Right, to piggyback on what you were saying there was, yes, to keep this operable, or in operation, it would be built here, exactly, so over the rec center, and then flip it back, then create the parking and everything after the fact. So in all these scenarios, there's acquisition and
So are we slowly but surely coming to the conclusion that we need to pivot from a joint facility to two separate facilities?
based on all the site analysis that we've taken into consideration, that would be our recommendation.
But then how does that affect the cost, the overall cost,
Right, so.
percentage-wise?
So going back, the separate building, roughly 128,000 square feet.
Yep.
Yeah, so like you just said, it's about 17,000 square foot upcharge, so about
$17 million?
17 million. That, just straight construction, I mean, that's kind of a while, not a while, but it's just kind of in.
It's a down and dirty number, we understand, but it's good for, so if we're gonna, to build separate facilities would cost 17 million more, but if we were able, for instance, to put the police station on the city hall site and put the fire station on its current site, that would save us land acquisition costs, and it would save us site development costs, because there's no ledge, there's no wetlands, there's advantages to those sites, right?
There's definitely some advantages of building on city-owned property on the existing headquarters sites. But then there's cons, your temporary parking or potentially temporary facilities for storage, because you're gonna need to utilize some of that space for laydown areas and there's a long list of different.
Well, it's not just parking, right? If it's, what are they gonna do in the meantime when there's demolition going on? How are they
No,
gonna,
exactly.
the logistics, how are they gonna operate both of them?
Exactly. They'll be in construction for multiple years. But yeah, there are challenges with it. I mean, it's done all the time. It's done with schools, as you're well aware. But it creates challenges as well.
Do you have a breakdown of what the parking needs look like for separate buildings? We looked at the 263 spaces for combined. How did that break down between the two?
Yeah, I don't have this here, but we have it in our programming. So we did fire separate, police separate, combined the two to get the 250. I don't recall, police was a little bit higher because of obviously the cruisers and the personal vehicles. But yes, I can provide it. So yeah, obviously that would be included into the parking counts per site for just the operations, as well as public needs.
So if I can summarize what I have taken away from the last 6 months or so of working on this, is that we have documented the need to replace the two buildings. They're in terrible shape, they're falling in on themselves. They're not really efficient at all for the modern operation. They don't comply with the needs that we know going forward, and especially for some of the gender equity issues and other things that are going to become more and more important. And we know what the space needs are to build a fire station or a police station going forward. Our problem is we have no place to put any of it.
I would agree.
Well, not as one, I think, right?
Well, not as one, but there still would be challenges
Yeah, yeah.
with doing two separate buildings. And it may be that you would need to acquire a piece of property to do the police station, whether it be on Commerce or whether
Yeah.
it be on Pleasant. And you could potentially then, we could potentially though build the fire station where it is now. But we'd lose the rec center, or,
That might be tight. Once you look at the total program on that, we'd have to look at that. I mean, I'll just ask the question, just to put it out on the table, is it worth doing the response study from Pleasant? If it's within a mile, mile and a half, get that data to find out if
That's
that's.
what I agree with you.
I think.
Because you can close Briggs.
Yeah, we
because
need- we
Briggs
need
is
to
right
know
around the
We need
corner.
to know the answers to those questions,
I would
right?
like to see Briggs, like, you could close Briggs because it's so close,
To the
right?
Commerce.
Sell that land, not that you.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to see.
I'm
what the-
just saying,
yeah,
you
what
need
the
to
chief-
look at
yeah.
it. Clo-
It's worth considering, yeah. I'm wondering how hard the space, the square footage you have mapped out, are those like, is that a dream scenario? Like those, the 58,000 square foot, is that a dream? Is it like, you know what I mean? Like, is there room there? Is there any room there? Is that the ideal size? Like, what informs that? And I know it's late in the game, and I apologize, but can we just back up to what informs that spacing?
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as a dream. It definitely supports their operations and the future operations. But, once a property or site is kind of narrowed down,
Yeah,
yes, there could be some wiggle room. We've kind of maxed out cell count, we kind of maxed out dispatch counts for, regional lockup and regional dispatch on the police side. On the fire side, for future apparatus, storage, there's a maintenance phase, which could get reduced. I mean, on this one, yes, about 15,000 of accessory mechanics bays, which is pretty substantial. Keeping them on property or somewhere else. Similarly with the police department. Again, not a dream, but they're.
but there's not a ton of, all right. I was just asking if there's any room, but that's all.
Jack, have we looked into any existing buildings in the downtown area that could be rehabbed into a police station, similar to what North Attleboro did 20, 25 years ago? I think they had a similar
I don't think there's anything.
issue. There were limited space in the downtown area, but they were able to find.
Yeah, they got an old jewelry factory and they turned it into a police station,
Well, we also own the annex right next to City Hall,
right?
but that's a whole nother topic of discussion.
Talking about the old post office.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the annex.
So are you talking about taking over a building or identifying a lot, demolishing the building and building a new building? Or you just have,
More taking over an existing building.
Saying retrofitting.
Yeah, retrofitting can be a challenge based on when it's built. So a police facility, a fire facility is considered an essential facility or a category 4 in structural nature. To put that in comparison, a school, a business is considered category 2. It's about 2 to 2.5 times greater structural strength for resistance of
So
forces.
this is like earthquake issues?
Earthquake, lateral issues, things of that nature. So when you get into certain buildings, sometimes becomes cost prohibitive to reinforce those buildings to meet that requirement for being an essential facility. It balances itself out. Not to say it can't be done. North Attleboro was a perfect example of that, where you had a pretty robust building. There was minimal effort to reinforce that, but it does have to be put into consideration when you're evaluating.
I just didn't know what's in the surrounding area. I think we've had older buildings torn down in the past few years. Are those properties where the.
Most of them that are anywhere near the train station are getting rehabbed into apartments.
yeah, those aren't just getting demolished as purposes. The only one that comes to mind is the one on John William Street.
Well, the Armory,
Yeah.
yeah. and the Armory site is, if we could ever get that from the federal government.
I've asked again and again. I think it doesn't come up until 2 years at the earliest. I have reached out again.
And that might be a site that we could put, would that be a?
Well, and it has to go to, apparently has to be, whether it needs to be cleaned in any way, and then it has to be put out to other federal departments to see if anybody there wants it. But I did email. I can't call it up.
And then I think it has to go to the state of Massachusetts, who, and then they all
We
get
would
to
get
say
last
yes or
dibs,
no.
yeah, we get last dibs.
But the other thing, the reason why it might be useful is that if it's not necessarily the end use is the station, maybe that could be the temporary stayover while one building is getting demolished and built. That seems like it could just fit for a temporary facility to house one department at a time
Yeah,
while the other building's being demolished and built.
That's a
and
good
one
thought,
is
Karen.
occupied, you can move the other one in there
Yeah.
temporarily to be used. So maybe it's not necessarily an outright acquisition, but an agreement with the government, if that's what it turns out to be, that we use that as a temporary stayover while each building is demolished and built.
and that might be an easier lift with the federal government to get the use of it, if not the title to it.
Yeah,
But the other thing to remember is that the history in this city is that we build buildings about every 100 years. And so we've always been looking at the real long-term future and thinking that this will be the last fire station or police station that will get built for the next 100 years. And so therefore, we want to make sure that it's adequate and that 10 years from now and 20 years from now, we're not saying, what were they thinking
yeah.
when they built this
That's
too
fair,
small?
that's fair, that's fair, yeah.
Jake?
Question. Would it even make sense to consider, if we did separate structures, putting the police station, since they're the one that has more flexibility in location somewhere, and then putting the fire station where the current police station is now? So you don't have to, would it even fit? Would you then have to still look at acquiring that other property? Like, just a thought, like, at least then the fire station would be close to where it currently is, so hopefully the same standards.
So,
So if the parking garage didn't exist,
this is gone, this is
Yeah,
gone.
the whole left side is
This,
gone.
but the property line is here, which I'm sorry you can't quite see, but for the,
we'd still have to acquire.
still would have to be some acquisition.
Position.
There's an auto parts store, there's the industrial museum, and there's Vinnie Germani's office along
Because
there.
that would, sorry to cut you off, for parking requirements.
The auto parts store is closed now.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
It's empty.
And the double ACS studios are over there,
We are,
but we could
But we-
probably find a home for you somewhere
we're
else.
agile.
But if, following up on Jay's point, would a fire facility fit here if the police department was, say, up Pleasant Street?
It's possibly something to consider, you know, based on, there may have to be some potential program reductions just to make it fit within those city-owned properties.
Well,
unless-
what if we were to acquire the other properties?
I think if that was
The
the
block.
case, then everything else, then I would say it could be feasible.
Pretty close to making that all work there.
So
The next-
that sounds to me like a very interesting idea, would be if we could acquire those properties and first build a police station and then build a fire station. Have any thoughts on that?
Well, we still have City Hall there and all the needs of the City Hall staff, so that doesn't help us at all. Right,
Agreed.
But I think that could be addressed to some level as we further that thought and development. I think we could address that, because realizing there's one thing that's not seen here is that outside structure, that auxiliary building, but we take all of this away and you're left with this as a block. That can come further away here and open up a swath in between. And we can make it so that there's more parking and whatnot to address City Hall. You're able to address the fire apparatus. We need to keep the response section of the apparatus free and clear, tight to the road on one side. The question becomes both how narrow these roads are. Are they able to accommodate the vehicles turning out in both directions, as well as some of the lower bridge heights throughout the city for the vehicles and the apparatus and their response.
Yeah, Pine Street's too narrow for that, for a turning radius of a, let alone an engine. The ladder truck would fit on Pine Street.
Yeah,
And all the dwellings and all the structures on, well, I don't know if it's northeast, west, or south, but on the lower part of Pine, you see all those buildings, they're right up to the curb. So if anything, then that means you're gonna have to pull or widen on Pine Street, which then narrows what's going on at Government Center right now.
Which, I mean, we can address the response from within the apparatus, within the apron, so that section between the building and the street, that can be used as part of their turning radius pretty simply, and the reason for that being kept that way is so that we can accommodate a drive-through. So maybe it's the return that comes back at Pine, and the response is out to Union. Again, all valid ideas of how, that we need to kind of get into in that next level of, if there is a fire apparatus, fire station going there, accommodating what's needed for City Hall. And the unique challenges to solve the, come up with a solution that's going to solve all the challenges there.
Another question?
If I may, on that though, Mary, then I would submit then that we have to think about the future expansion of City Hall.
yeah.
I mean, the building's too small as it is right
be
now
boxed in.
for staff, so now the question is, how much
Yeah.
bigger we're gonna make the project? So if we're gonna look at an analysis of determining whether the site there is feasible for for a city hall and a fire department, okay, that gets some traction, then we gotta start thinking, the future size of City Hall. Just currently right now, the parking lot's too small. We're already looking into ways how we're gonna expand that parking lot just right now for the immediate first years. But given the growth of the city, it's one of the other things we've been talking about,
Yep.
is, the growth of the city, the demographics, increase in service needs, is gonna equate into eventually increase in staffing needs. I mean, we're bursting right now, and there's people doing multiple hats, doing a lot of things. At some point, that's gonna give. So you can only go on for so long with that. So we gotta start thinking about, do we go up at City Hall in terms of, vertical? Do we go horizontal? But something's gonna give eventually. So we gotta, if that's the case though, all I'm saying, so we're gonna look at the fire station at Government Center. We have to concurrently start thinking, Mayor, what we're gonna do with City Hall as well. And that was never part of the equation.
No.
So I don't want to arbitrarily throw that in there, but that's going to be the reality of whether or not we do police station here or fire station at this site.
Yeah, Gary, I've often thought that one easy fix for City Hall might be connecting the old post office to City Hall if we lose that surface parking there. But if you built an addition between the two and the Registry of Deeds and the Registry of Motor Vehicles was gone, that might be not a bad way to increase the capacity at City Hall.
Is there any, the current lot where the fire headquarters are, how undersized is that?
Maybe a new city hall.
For a new, well, no, I was gonna actually just say to keep the fire over there. How much bigger would that have to be? Is there any?
So if that's the firehouse portion of the project, and we just slide that forward, if you would. We're into the,
Yep.
we're into the school building, we're into this neighborhood lot, I mean, we're right on the property line there, if you would. You bring that down in whatever level, I mean, you're talking all three of those, and
So that geometry, though, was designed or created to fit the site at City Hall. So now if you were to take off the police section, the police component, would the geometry for the fire department building remain the same? Probably not. You could modify it, right?
this is it's a generic exercise, but not quite generic. I mean, the building areas and the things are all appropriate. But in order to test fit pretty quickly, we haven't gone through and tailored to respond to each site specifically. So i.e., if, Commerce Way, we had a slope, we could deal with that in a different manner. We haven't gone through to that level yet. It's been at a very high level to test fit the the buildings to the amount of area, land area that's available. So at a high level, we can say there's very little that we're gonna be able to do in order to shrink this and fit. Or, yes, this fits. And we can make that, make some accommodations in the building that we can actually have, growth opportunity or better layout or something of that nature.
So what I would like to see, if I can say this, I would like to see the response times for the Schwachman land for a combined facility, because I think we need to know that. I also, I think, would like to see if we were to just put a police station there or on Commerce Way, what it would look like, better with the blocks rather than what
Yeah,
it's
we
hard to
certainly have
see.
more opportunity now by separating them, it gives us more
Yeah.
options.
And
More money, but more options.
And then I think what I'd like to see is a fire-only facility, either here or at City Hall, to see what those would look like.
Yeah, I'm disinclined to City Hall because then that gets us into a new City Hall, which was not, which is not a bite I was gonna take.
Facilities has a smaller footprint, or
The fire is a smaller footprint, is it?
Fire is, yep.
But, it doesn't mean that we couldn't put a parking garage at the City Hall site to accommodate it. And it doesn't mean that we can't, as I said, combine, it's not part of their mission, but to make City Hall connect to the old post office to get you the additional probably 10 to 20,000 square feet that you need.
Yeah, but that's I agree, but then there's a whole build-out with that. So I'm just saying that, and again, I'm just off, that didn't appear to me to be part of the initial equation, is now factoring in a renovation of City Hall. It's still gonna run you $5 or so million easily to retrofit, whether we put a skywalk in from above to connect, if it's a ground connection, if we're gonna fill in that area of the parking lot, and so have one big building, however we do it, retrofit the Shang building. There's gonna be some internal logistical changes to the existing City Hall so that it appears to be seamlessly connected.
Yep.
All these, I'm just saying, that's another lift, another,
It's not part of their mission, Gary, I agree.
no, I'm not saying that it's part of their mission, but what I'm saying is long-term.
But what I'd like to do
Part of the
is-
loan author, the money
I
that
would
we're
like to
money.
see, though, in the final report that we get, that,
whether or not it fits.
we could put a fire station here, and this is what it would look like, this is what it would mean, and we may at some point say, it just doesn't work, because
Yeah.
City Hall's gonna need some work, but I think that the possibilities that I see are a separate police station, either at Commerce or at Pleasant. I see a combined facility at Pleasant, and I see a separate fire station either here or at City Hall. Those seem to be the most reasonable possibilities we can look at this point. Jay, you had some questions?
Great question. The land on Pleasant Street, you had mentioned there's some wetlands and things like that. So if we put the combined facility there, how much of the usable space would we consume and what would be remaining? A guesstimate's fine.
I think it would be everything from, push your hand on the thing, that's the wetlands?
Yep.
But I thought you were saying that it would be to the west where the whole thing would go.
It's the plan, and put your hand right on the plan, Joe. So the plan is there and kind of up. So we're out of the wetlands, we're out of the floodplain.
It's only here.
It's
Yeah.
the developable portion of the site.
So it will be everything between the
Yeah,
Harbor
kind of
One
fits.
Bank and the northeast access road.
So you would develop 100% of the land that's developable,
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, this
That
is
helps.
developable here,
other
but,
than that.
because this is all wetlands and then floodplain. So it's just here. But
They were mentioning response times. I'd like to see an overlay of the entire city with each of these to get an idea of the relative distance. And something seems to be outlying may not be in terms of how quickly a vehicle can traverse that. In other words, Commerce Way is out a little ways, but it's a straight road into the center and many other places. So the response time might be deceiving if you're just looking at the location. And the same is true for the Pleasant Street location. Compare that to trying to exit and maneuver out of the center of the city at rush hour. I mean, it's just, it's hard to compare. The proximity piece goes away quickly when you look at the roads and so forth.
So, I know traffic signals won't be an issue, because I know then we have to figure out which ones we have to equip with opticomms to keep the trucks going straight. So I suspect that traffic volume is gonna get factored into your run times, correct? Because I was gonna say, his points are clear, it's a straight shot.
Yep.
But once you hit County Square and start going north through up 123, got heavy traffic volume there.
Yeah,
And this portion of 123 as well, just
Our-
heavy traffic volumes.
our consultant, not only does he look at run times, street speed and things of that nature, but he also looks at frequency of where your calls are currently and projected
Sure.
where your calls will be in the next 10, 15 years. So he plots all that data in as part of the response time, and then he maps it out. So we'll get an existing condition map. You'll see kind of a, lack of a better way to say it, but a hot, cold zone of coverage of the city from each of the stations. And then as we plug in, we're gonna take this headquarters offline, so to speak, and we're gonna make Pleasant Street the headquarters. What does that do to that color map of covering the city in response times? And all of it is in essence trying to meet the ISO standard and the NFPA standard for response. And primary in all of that is the 8-minute response for cardiac arrest ultimately.
Jack, is this location for Pleasant Street, is that to the west of Lindsay Street or to the east of Lindsay Street?
At the Y, where the Y is.
And I can't picture where Lindsay Street
You
is.
know where the Harbor One Bank is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right behind
No,
it.
I know all
behind
that,
it.
I'm using
Oh.
Lindsay Street as my
Oh.
reference point.
Oh, okay.
If it's west of Lindsay or
Lindsay
east of
Street's the
Lindsay.
light, so
West.
It's on the
Ty-
north, it's
Ty
on the
would know.
northern side of Lindsay,
Ty would know, he
right?
lives there.
It's further down.
It's on the northern side of Lindsay.
What's
Yeah.
on the northern side of
It's on the
Lindsay?
north, it's on the northern side, I live in one of those.
Oh, so it's on the east side of it then?
And I would also hazard a guess, if you don't mind my saying, that a very high percentage of the activity the fire and the police be responding to would be turning left.
That's what I was wondering,
Yes.
how far out onto Pleasant
It's
is.
almost entirely residential.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, so it's on the east side of Lindsay Street. All right.
Yeah, so just, which is one of the things that would militate against a combined facility with a fire station there. But in terms of the police station, since the cruisers are out on the road, they're
Right.
not, sitting at the station waiting for a call and driving out. They're out on the street the whole time.
I have to say, I just feel, at this point for me, if we're trying to conceive of this now as two separate projects, I need to rethink this, because it opens up more options that in my mind, I need to rethink it, because now there's possibilities that we haven't even put on the table before, because they were too small.
Right.
So I don't know, I just don't know, I can sit here doing that right now. I don't know if other folks are feeling the same way, because in my head, I'm looking around the city thinking, oh, could have fit over there, could have.
Yeah, clearly, it
mean-
opens up the options.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here trying to think of you. I
So
mean, I'm
maybe-
disinclined to acquire property if we don't have to.
Yeah, I agree.
So I just want to be really thoughtful instead of just spitballing as we're sitting here.
If we were to decouple the facilities, are there any of the original dozen or so that we looked at that we might want to revisit?
I'd have to,
I know it's been a long.
I don't remember all of them.
We could look at that.
We can look at it. I remember a lot of them were pretty small, locations were kind of tough. But no, we'll look at it, if, like you said, if the direction's leaning that way, right? So we can just take some blocks
Yeah.
and figure out if they're feasible.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the one we're looking at is probably the only one really possible for the combined facility, but I think we're gonna get the NFP response times, and we're gonna find out that it's not. And so therefore, if that means that we're making the pivot to two separate facilities, we've got 3 or 4 possibilities as to what we can do with two separate facilities, but if there's anything we took off the table 6 months ago, because we were only looking at combined, tell us if there's anything that, should come back on the table.
Absolutely.
It shouldn't take too long to
For
look at
police
that,
and
right?
or fire.
Correct.
Yeah.
Police or fire.
Yeah.
And gentlemen, can you just, what were the square feet requirements for the police and fire? Was it 58 and
70,000 and 50.
70 and 58.
70 for police and 58 for fire? All right, and so that's the footprint we're looking for?
And so,
Not footprint, that's total square footage, so.
Okay.
Footprint might be a little bit, will be a little bit smaller, but that's the total building
Okay.
square footage.
so those independent spatial needs, what was the, because Jack had mentioned, these are, the existing structure over 100 years old. So what was the timeline on when this analysis was done? What were we looking at, 25 years, 20 years? What was the?
Usually it's a 30 to 40 year
30 to 40.
projection. I mean, we project, when we're doing the analysis, 25 to 30. And then we try and put in a little bit of safety with another 10 years or so, what might that be? But it's hard to anticipate, it's challenging to anticipate what is policing going to be in even 10 years. Because if you would have told me 10 years ago, we'd be looking at unmanned aerial vehicles in police and fire operations, or some of the challenges, the digital evidence requirements that they're having, it was never considered, and we were not laughed at, but questioned for bringing anything of that nature up at that point in time.
But using those optics, as a result of that, does it make facilities bigger or smaller by introducing these technological concepts you just mentioned?
Yes. It does both.
It does
There's certain areas that will shrink, and there's certain areas, right now, I just met with perfect example, I just met with a police department that we were talking to in 2015. They've upstaffed by a whole department, this is in mid-Connecticut, but a whole department to deal with the social and psychological issues around policing. Now, it's not only for the community, it's also for the police officers. So they now have a division within their workforce that supports the officers and the community at the same time. Not a single department 5 years ago was thinking about that.
So if you're thinking the longevity of a facility now is 25 years, maybe put on another 10, that's the existing actual hard asset. So one of the things that we ought to consider is when we're looking for a site, isn't just so as a cookie cutter, we go, great, that design just fits that site. Get a site that's a little bigger that we have to identify. So if there's any expansion, we could do it there. Rather than having to say, okay, now we have to abandon this site 25, 30 years, 35 years from now, go to another site. Let's see what we could select for a site now that could accommodate, a 20% increase.
Yeah, because if you look at where
Taking
the,
50 years maybe,
With
Yeah,
that
Gary, if you look at where the fire station is right now, 125 years ago when they built there, that was probably just wide open and the
Yeah.
biggest thing that they could ever think of.
So with that argument, Pleasant Street becomes not practical.
For both, probably
both.
not.
For a combined
Probably
facility.
not.
But for a police facility, either that or Commerce Way might be usable because it would be a much bigger site, just devoted to one.
Could you flip what I originally said and build the police station next to where the police station is? Like, would that fit better?
On the city
But then you
hall.
still have to find a new place for fire department, so never mind.
There's still a challenge to both of it, and I would venture to say that, with a little bit more work, we'll probably find that the combined facility at Pleasant will give us what you need today and that expansion space, because we're going to look at it in that manner. Where is it going to expand? You're going to expand in your locker rooms, you're going to expand in a few divisions. We'll make sure that that's accommodated and make sure that the design can accommodate and it will anticipate some level of addition to it as well. So, we're not looking to back you into a corner that in 30 years, you're now looking again to say, okay, we've got to build a whole new facility. That's not our goal. We want to make sure that you're comfortable today and, in 30, 40 years, if you find out you need a growth area there's a planned growth area that you can add on in this section.
Well, I think that's extremely important because, as you said, and I think we've seen, you know, it wasn't that long ago that there were very, very few females, and now there are more and more, and that seems to be the trend. But, you know, we can be really sure what's going to happen tomorrow and probably reasonably sure what's going to happen in 6 months or a year. But the farther we get out on the timeline, the harder it is to be sure as to what we're doing, right?
Yep.
Jack, was Highland Park on one of the initial areas to review?
We did think about it. One of the reasons, there were a number of reasons we rejected it. One was that the proximity for a fire station to so many houses. A second thing was it was acquired for open space. And also the response times. We looked at all of that.
And it's in the middle of a residential area.
Yeah, so it probably doesn't work. And you know, I think there is an aspect of this that is political, that we have to sell a debt exclusion to the community at some point in the future to build this. And frankly, we have to find a way to keep our current departments operating until that future build-out can occur. So we got a lot of moving parts here. But I think that politically, it would be very difficult to use something that was acquired for open space to build one of these facilities.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I don't like it at Highland for open space reasons. It's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. From a city planning perspective, I don't think you were
Yeah,
thrilled.
we had that conversation, Ray, yeah, it
So-
doesn't,
Yeah, I mean, if you've got fire engines coming out at 7:10 in the morning or 1:50 in the afternoon,
It'd be a mess.
there'd be an awful lot of traffic with parents, students, and staff members, so that would,
Yeah, I was just,
no, it was a question worth asking,
Yeah.
but
couldn't remember what.
it was something that we kind of knocked off the list a while ago.
And say we vacate the government center area, the fire station area, have there been thoughts of what becomes of that space?
absolutely, we gotta figure out adaptive reuse to backfill those two, sure.
In my eyes, I would want the city to be able to keep that land for the public as opposed to selling it off to private.
Well, I'm sure somebody would be interested in turning the old fire station into apartments because of its proximity to the train station, but I don't think that's within our jurisdiction here.
Yeah, but I broached the issue with the mayor that, you know, despite what goes where eventually, if those become, I don't wanna say surplus property, but just properties that aren't used, we have to come up with some uses for that too, sure, we would just let those lay dormant.
Right, I wouldn't want them dormant, at the same time, I don't know if I'd want them going to be sold off, then the
So I'm
city
saying,
could never.
that's not part of the equation right now to sell those assets, absolutely not. Till we figure out a use for that, I wouldn't recommend to sell those.
Yeah, as you can see, the problem, part of the problem we're butting up against, and I've talked to Mason and Gary about this, is, anybody watch Game of Thrones? We have a whole, you move one thing, and then there's ramifications to that, and we really need to think about all the consequences of every move that we make, so we're not being duplicative or, you know, excessive. So that's what I'm sitting here thinking, because you're right, right? If you do one thing, what do you do with the other thing? So,
Right, then in 100 years,
exactly.
now there's nothing
Yep.
in the city center.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
consequences,
let's
every
not worry about
choice.
100 years, from well, I think 5, 10 years ahead of time, let
Yeah.
alone 100 years from
Yeah.
now.
We're
If
definitely
you-
trying to think of the consequences.
If you look at the Pleasant Street site, adjacent to that is a gigantic Texas Instrument campus that is not fully being used now, and who knows what's going to happen there. But that's all space that's
That's a huge.
adjacent to what you're looking at. There's just a phenomenal amount of space that you don't have to touch any buildings at that location. if you laid the entire duplex complex right there, where would it, how much area would it take?
That much
From the street edge.
from the street. But
Not considering the surface level parking or garage or anything like that, yeah.
And if you look at the main roads that intersect in that area or adjacent to it, on Pleasant Street,
down here.
Right, but one of the things, Ed, that I could see is that the farther you get off of Pleasant Street, the more you're adding to the response time, just to get out to Pleasant Street. You know,
Well, as I-
if you
then-
look
then
at
you-
whatever that building is there at the bottom, no, over to your right,
Middle bottom.
Middle bottom, this one?
yeah. I forget what building number that is.
if we traversed the TI site, you could get to anywhere in that whole area very quickly without using Pleasant Street.
Yeah, there's speed bumps back there too, though. They'd have to rethink some of the roads back there. Right? Your point's fine, but there's speed bumps right now to control traffic through there.
And I'll,
And it would add to times to get in and out of there.
I was just gonna say that, and I'll tell you, there's very few fire departments that want to traverse a site that's a privately owned site, private roadways, things of that nature. They want to get out to main streets, the streets that the city control cleaning, the city controls kind of the flow. They don't tend to use side streets like that where they're within private complexes unless they're responding to that complex.
So have we gone as far as we can this evening?
Probably not, but we have to stop at some point.
Do you have more questions, Gary?
No, well, it's a good dialogue. I mean, the more we talk, and the more ideas come out, and so. gotta
I
come
think
to a
we've made a
conclusion
lot
at
of
some-
progress.
Pardon
You know, we were sort of on
We made some
hold
really good
for
progress.
several months, but I
Yeah.
think we're making more progress now. We know what we want them to continue to look at,
And what we don't like, you know?
and yeah. And so I think we are making progress here.
Absolutely, I
But,
agree.
you know, also, we're running towards the end of our funds with them, and we're running towards the end of our time frame to complete this. So I think if we look at the things we were looking at, then maybe in another month or so, we can have another meeting, and then we can just tell you, finalize your report, and then we'll just have to internalize it.
Gary, is there anything in the industrial park on County Street?
That's kind of built out. And even if there is, we'd have to take the fire chief or the police chief down there, have them do a walkthrough, if there is a building or two to see, because we did that, I think, with the John William Street property, and there's some pros and cons. So because there might be a building, that in and of itself doesn't present it as an opportunity. It depends, it's how it flows internally for the police chief or the fire chief to figure out to see if it's, it accommodates their
That's
needs.
getting kind of far away from the city, for the fire department too, for the response times.
Well, Commerce, wait a minute. Yeah, that's even further away than Commerce Way.
Right.
Yeah, the intersection would say Frank Mossberg Drive
Probably
or
another
Franklin
half a mile,
McKay.
a third of a mile
is
down the
even
street.
further down toward Pawtucket than Commerce Way.
It's also how amazing how much more developed we are
Well,
than even 10 or 20 years ago. There's
plus a lot of
just-
those buildings, warehousing is coming back, so a lot of those big facilities, they're gonna get occupied. On two of the other buildings, we just did manufacturing, I'm sorry, I wish it was it's marijuana manufacturing and cultivation. They need big spaces,
Yeah.
so those are kind of getting consumed by about half a dozen different massive buildings in the city. They just need that kind of space. I'm talking orders of 80,000, 100,000 square foot buildings they're occupying. We just did one on Turner Street, 80,000 square foot building. They're converting into a cultivation, manufacturing facility for marijuana. So, even if there were a building, again, I don't want to speak for the fire chiefs at all, just because there's an opportunity. Jerry, I would say have them go down and take a look at it, but to your point, that's even further away from County Square, for a fire department, that is.
Where would we have construction going on in the city too? Because we just, that land down there at County and Reed just sold. And that's another big development.
Jackie, all
parcel.
over. All over.
Yeah, not my
It's just,
street.
it is, whether it's downtown redevelopment, out of the outer skirts, down the main, it isn't any particular place where it's occurring. It is scattered throughout the city.
The city's popular,
Sure is.
Sure,
well,
it definitely is.
and that's good. So how much time do you think you need to come back with some updates, guys?
I mean, we can set something up to talk about the other properties. The response time study's gonna take a little bit of time. Get our consultant on board, get him talking to the chief, gathering the information he needs from the department in order to be able to do that. So let's touch base with him.
Why don't we leave it that you will get in touch with Mason when you want to schedule something, when you're ready to go, so we can talk about the things we talked about tonight, and we can follow up on it, because we do need to bring this to a close, but I think we need to know the answers to the questions we've raised tonight.
Absolutely. So we'll get him.
Okay. Anybody have anything else? Then a motion to adjourn is in order at 6:42.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.